previously in Edgar Part 74, as well as OMB Circular A21, which were your cost principles, as well as OMB Circular A133, which were your audit principles, right? And those were our post-secondary folks. Our secondary folks were following OMB Circular A102, which was codified in Part 80 of Edgar, OMB Circular A87, which were your cost principles, and then again A133 for the audit. Well, that's very confusing. I mean, that's a mouthful for me just to even say out loud, right? And so what they decided was, why would we have all of these different circulars that apply to what can often be the same funding stream, right? Perkins dollars, but just depending on who gets it, all of a sudden we have a new set of regulations that apply. That doesn't make sense. Let's try and streamline this. Let's come up with one set of rules. And we will use that one set of rules, and we will require all of our federal agencies to rewrite their regulations to conform to that single set of rules. And so that's what happened. OMB worked with a group, and I can start clicking if I have a clicker. All right. OMB worked with a group to draft this new set of rules. And then the name has changed, right? When it first came out, the first time we heard about it was the notice document in 2013, and they called it the Super Circular. Then in 2014, when they started talking about it, it changed. They went to the Omni Circular. I don't know why they decided it wasn't so super anymore, but they went to the Omni Circular next. Well, now the common term you'll hear thrown around is the Uniform Grants Guidance. It doesn't really matter what you call it, but any of those names is really talking about the same set of uniform regulations, the single circular that came out that was going to apply across all different types of grant recipients and all federal agencies. There's just a few of the dates on when it came out. So what is included? Well, it includes those administrative requirements. And as I mentioned before, our administrative rules for state and local governments were previously codified in Part 80 of Edgar. And our administrative rules for our post-secondary folks and our nonprofits was in Part 74. Well, now we have one set of administrative rules. And on December 19th, the U.S. Department of Education adopted the new set, and it's now the new Part 74 of Edgar. And of course, as far as looking these up and figuring them out, they actually continue to use the reference from the Omni Circular, so it's like citing these rules is a real pain. Only a lawyer is going to get excited about following all of these citations. But just so you know, we have a new set of administrative rules, and once you have a new Edgar book that gets published, you'll see those new rules in Part 74. So everyone will be now subject to Part 74. Well, in addition to incorporating a single set of administrative rules, they also combined all three cost principles. So I mentioned previously the cost principles for state and locals is A87, for our post-secondary 21, and nonprofits had A122. Well, now we have a single set of cost principles, and we'll talk, of course, about all the changes and things that relate to those cost principles. And then our audit rules, we had the same set of audit rules previously across all three different types of groups. We continue to have our single audits. A133, there's just a few changes in those audit rules, and we'll discuss those as well. Who's covered? It's all non-federal entities expending federal awards. So everyone in this room is subject to these new requirements and regulations. COFAR is the, I think I have, Council on Financial Assistance Reform. That is the author of these new regulations. It's essentially a group, a task force within OMB with the input of key stakeholders. They are the masterminds behind all of the new rules and regulations. All right, the effective date is quite confusing. Because I just said we have a whole new Edgar, right? Edgar just came out December 19th, 2014. We have all these new rules. They are in the Federal Register. They have the authority of law. But they're not yet effective until you receive your first award after that date. For everyone in this room, July 1, 2015. The award you receive July 1, 2015 is subject to the new rules. right? So they don't work retroactively. If you've already applied for, received your Perkins subgrant, you have that money, you spend it according to to prior rules, what you probably think of as existing EDGAR, right? All of the changes I'm talking about, all of the things that I highlight in this presentation, it's for your July 1, 2015 award. There's a lot of confusion on the effective date. The best thing I can tell you in figuring out if you have other funding streams, if you get an incremental funding, what about carryover, what about this, right? If you're not sure what set of rules apply, it will be in your grant award notice. So you'll have some heads up, right? The state will tell you exactly which set applies in your grant award notice so that you'll know whether or not you apply the previous set of rules or the new, the recently codified rules. So why the change? Well, the idea was to make things a little bit more streamlined, a little bit simpler, wanted to strengthen efficiency, increase oversight, and I think you'll see there have been some changes that are certainly more streamlined and more efficient, but then there are also some changes that will probably seem more burdensome, certainly for pass-through agencies. If you had to pick a loser in these new regulations, I would say it's our pass-through agencies, so our state departments, that really got a lot of additional requirements layered on, which may unfortunately translate or flow down to you as the subgrantees, but really those pass-through entities have a lot of new stuff. If there is an inconsistency between what you read in the new EDGAR, or what we talk about, and then the Perkins program statute or program requirements, the program statute rules the day, right? You always follow the more specific rule. So a cost may be reasonable and necessary and allocable per the cost principles, but that cost may be a violation of supplanting requirements, right? So I don't care if it's reasonable, necessary, and allocable. If it's supplanting, I can't do that. Well, where does my supplanting rule come from? It comes from the Perkins program statute, right? Supplanting's not an EDGAR, that's a program rule. And so you have to comply not only with these requirements and these regulations, but whatever's the most specific rule, that one will rule the day. So there are some major themes to the new Omni Circular or the Uniform Grants Guidance or our new EDGAR, whatever terminology we want to use. The biggest theme, perhaps, is this shift from compliance to performance. Really, the OMB and COFAR in drafting these new regulations wanted to place a lot of emphasis on performance and not just have compliance for compliance sake, but really start seeing performance measured, start taking performance into account in your single audits, really start making performance a focus for determining how you're doing as an as you administer these funds. And so we see that in a couple of different places. There's also some new flexibility that will hopefully, you can take advantage of. One of the biggest areas of change that we've seen relates to time and effort documentation. How many of you are familiar with time and effort documentation? So a few of you. So we'll talk a little bit about that and those changes. There are some, in the current rules, there are very prescriptive requirements related to time and effort. Under the new rules, that standard has loosened quite a bit. And then there's also this emphasis on strengthening accountability through policies and procedures and policies that protect against fraud, waste, and abuse. I will tell you that the new Omni Circular has required policies, I want to say, in more than 10 different locations that you'll see where you need to have required policies and procedures. That terminology is just used throughout the regulations. And so it's an area of focus. It's important for you to develop policies and procedures so that when your auditors do come in or your monitors come in and they say, well, look, the federal regs say you have to have a policy here, show me your policy, that you have that to produce for them, that you can demonstrate you're compliant with those requirements.